Hello and welcome to this brand new edition of Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha. Khanna. Our focus continues to be on the Israel-Hamas war. After days of intense and relentless Israeli airstrikes on Gaza, there is now growing evidence that Israel is preparing for an unprecedented ground invasion of Gaza. Israeli ground forces seem to be ready to enter the Gaza Strip, one of the most densely populated places in the world, to fight Hamas, which launched chilling, horrifying and unimaginably savage terror attacks on Israel last Saturday. The Israeli army today said it is ready for a ground assault on Hamas in Gaza, but the country's political leaders are yet to take a decision. The army spokesperson told journalists, "We are waiting to see what our political leadership decides about a potential ground incursion." Over 1,200 Israelis have died in these attacks. Some 1,500 Hamas terrorists have been killed in the Israeli counterattack. At least 1,300 residents of the Gaza Strip have been killed in Israeli airstrikes that have flattened several large buildings into heaps of rubble. If the Israelis do roll into Gaza with a mechanized infantry force along with air support from attack helicopters, a fierce form of urban warfare will break out on the narrow streets and lanes of the Gaza enclave, which has been described as the biggest open-air prison in the world. It is surrounded by Israel, Egypt and the Mediterranean Sea. It is home to 2.3 million people. There are 5,500 people per square kilometer living in Gaza compared to Israel's 400 people per square kilometer. Gaza is completely blockaded, with Israel imposing a total siege in the last few days and cutting off food, water, fuel and power supplies. If the airstrikes, which are already wreaking havoc in the enclave, are indeed followed by a ground invasion, the humanitarian crisis will most certainly spiral rapidly. Hospitals in Gaza are already overwhelmed. The enclave has run out of power. Many believe a ground assault is now inevitable. The public and the national security establishment in Israel are demanding retribution for the horrific terror attacks by Hamas. But a ground invasion would be complicated by Gaza's dense population, its complex underground network of tunnels, and the danger it would pose to Israelis, Americans, and others who are being held hostage by Hamas. Of course, this will be in addition to the grave impact it will have on the Gazans. Former U.S. Defense Secretary and CIA Director Leon Panetta has said, and I quote, "The problem is that it's basically house-to-house fighting once you get into Gaza, and so it could be a heavy price. But on the other hand, it's very clear that Israel has made the decision that they have got to crush Hamas in Gaza." That's what he said. Israel has amassed 300,000 reservists near the Gaza border and a huge mobilization of troops. As we said, more than 1,300 people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes in Gaza and hundreds of thousands have been displaced. The only power station in the Gaza enclave has stopped working. Hospitals there risk turning into morgues without electricity. That is what the International Committee of the Red Cross has said. Gaza's only power plant ran out of fuel on Wednesday and backup generators could stop working in hours. Medical centers have been overwhelmed after Israel imposed a complete siege and pounded the territory with air and artillery strikes. Israel has vowed not to restore electricity or allow basic resources and humanitarian aid into Gaza until Hamas releases around 150 hostages who it abducted during its attacks on Saturday. The Red Cross says as Gaza loses power, hospitals lose power, putting newborns in incubators and elderly patients on oxygen at risk. Kidney dialysis stops and x-rays can't be taken. Hospitals in Gaza are seeing long queues with injured people waiting for emergency rooms. They are running out of essential medical equipment and appealing for blood donations. Children, some seriously wounded, are lying in hospital beds, crying and waiting for treatment. Doctors are now having to make tough decisions about who to operate on as fuel supplies run critically low. Doctors say only life-saving treatment is being carried out in many cases. The absence of humanitarian corridors is resulting in unprecedented problems for hospitals. In previous wars, the Red Cross and the United Nations were able to secure humanitarian corridors to deliver aid, but Israel has not allowed for this yet. Egypt says it has been trying to arrange aid deliveries through its Gaza crossing, but this has been made difficult by Israeli bombardment in the territory. Needless to say, it's a nightmare for the people of Gaza. Meanwhile, India, which has expressed full support for Israel and strongly condemned the terror attacks by Hamas, today made a statement on Palestine, saying, "Our policy in this regard has been long-standing and consistent. India has always advocated the resumption of direct negotiations towards establishing a sovereign, independent and viable state of Palestine, living within secure and recognized borders, side by side, at peace with Israel."
We're delivering on our word, supplying ammunition, interceptors, to replenish Israel's Iron Dome, alongside other defense materiel. First shipments of U.S. military support have already arrived in Israel, and more is on the way. As Israel's defense needs evolve, we will work with Congress to make sure that they're met. And I can tell you, there is overwhelming bipartisan support in our Congress for Israel's security. Here in Israel and everywhere, we will reaffirm the crystal clear warning that President Biden issued yesterday to any adversary, state or non-state, thinking of taking advantage of the current crisis to attack Israel. Don't. The United States has Israel's back.
We are targeting the enemy in order to uproot the capability of the enemy to carry on with this campaign of destroying Israel, trying to destroy it as part of an empire of evil which has its claws all around us, from north, with Hezbollah, from the south, from Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Look around us in the entire region. Look at the havoc that they have created everywhere Iran has touched. In Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon. So Hamas has carried out war crimes, crimes against humanity. It has chosen to conduct its war against Israel, hiding, as always, within populated areas, using the population as a shield, using mosques, shops, houses, anything of civilian lives as their center of activity. And that is why we're operating to uproot this infrastructure.
Aware of the developments in Israel. As announced by External Affairs Minister yesterday, Operation Ajay has been launched to facilitate the return from Israel of our citizens who wish to come back. The first charter flight will be reaching Tel Aviv later tonight to pick up Indian citizens and is likely to return to India tomorrow morning. We will share with you information about further flights as they are finalized. This is still an evolving situation. You are aware, External Affairs Minister took a preparatory meeting earlier in the day. We're also in touch with our, of course, with our embassy in Tel Aviv, our representative office in Ramallah, as well as with our neighboring, the missions in our neighboring, in the neighboring countries there. One citizen who was there, I think, injured. Yes, we are aware of that case. Of course, we are in touch with them. I understand the person is in hospital, but I think it's improving or has better situation. We are also, of course, thankfully have not heard of any Indian casualty so far.
It was a dual attack by the terror organization of Hamas from Gaza. They started by bombardment with rockets, which we are used to. It's not the first time. It happened in the past many times. But in parallel, close to 1,000 terrorists infiltrated into different Jewish communities in Israel, small ones, kibbutzim on the border, around the border, kibbutzim, villages, agricultural villages, and even cities, and went from house to house and slaughtered and killed more than 1,000 civilians. In total, 1,200 people were murdered, as we know now. And the pictures are ISIS-like pictures. It's terrible. They burned people in their houses, whole families executed, beheading. I don't want to go into graphics, but what you imagine about the stories of ISIS, this is what happened there. Hamas became ISIS. It's unbelievable. And in parallel, there was also a party of young people, about 3,000 young people. We have these open fields festivals. They went there on the pickup trucks, as you know from ISIS pictures, with machine guns, and just started killing people. And this was not enough. Young people, terrible story, terrible issue. 260 people died there, at least, that we know for now. But they also abducted up to 150, around 150 people back into Gaza.
All right. And as we speak, Israeli airstrikes are relentlessly pounding Gaza, making life a complete nightmare for the Palestinians in that enclave. To talk about life in Gaza and West Bank, we are now joined by Bushra Khalidi. She is a Palestinian woman. She works as policy lead at Oxfam, and she joins us live now from the West Bank. Bushra, this is a very difficult time for the people of Israel as well as for the Palestinians. Thank you very much for joining us at a time like this. If you could begin by telling us what the situation is like where you are in the West Bank. Are things relatively normal there? And then if you could give us a sense of how devastating the last few days of airstrikes have been in Gaza. I believe many of your colleagues who were in Gaza currently are either missing or have not been heard from in a while. Please give us a sense of what's happening on the ground.
Thank you for having me. The situation in the West Bank is not normal. Actually, the situation in the West Bank and East Jerusalem and Gaza is never normal. We've been living under 57 years of military occupation, and in Gaza, a 16-year-old illegal blockade, and that is far from normal. The situation is catastrophic. In the West Bank, we are under full lockdown imposed by Israel since Sunday. There are about 640 checkpoints across the West Bank, closing all cities, entries and exit to cities, so we cannot leave Ramallah. We can't travel between cities. We can't visit our families that live in different towns or villages or nearby towns. There have been today only 40 incidents of settler violence reported to the West Bank Protection Consortium. Today, 3 communities in the West Bank were forcibly displaced. This amounts to annexation of the West Bank. We have heard that there are WhatsApp groups where there have been calls to arm civilian settlers in the West Bank and basically shoot to kill any Palestinian they see. The messages and the text messages that have been shared across different settler outposts are frightening. I mean, we're not leaving our homes. We're not traveling on roads that we share with settlers because there has been already up to now over 20 killed in the West Bank since Saturday. This year has been the most devastating year for West Bank Palestinians, with the record number of fatalities of Palestinians killed by either settlers or armed forces, Israeli forces. In Gaza, I've been on calls to colleagues and my in-laws, and every single time I am trying to share this message with the world, I choke up because of imagining the situation that they're in. I'm desperately waiting for the 2 ticks on WhatsApp to appear so that I can assume that their phone is on and that they're alive. Every time I've spoken to them, they've said that the bombardments have been constant, that they've been the bloodiest, that they've been the most destructive. I've just got a notification from a colleague who is stuck in Rafah. Rafah was bombarded 2 days ago completely. He's sleeping on the street in camps, and he can't reach his family in the middle of the city in Gaza, and he's desperate to go and meet them. We have 5 colleagues that have completely lost their homes. We've asked them to share with us videos and signs of life, It's harrowing. They don't have water. They don't have electricity. There's no internet. There's no phone lines. If we are able to get through to them, it's because they are able to get some internet or some electricity somewhere to charge quickly their phones and call their loved ones and just make sure that we're okay. So right now we're focusing, of course, on locating all of our staff, but it's been a very complicated exercise to do this. As you said in your report, the hospital is threatening to shut its operations in the next couple of days, and you rightly said it is going to be a morgue, a mass cemetery. Food supplies are dwindling. Wastewater treatment plants are not operating. There's raw sewage being poured into the sea, actually Olympic pool size of raw sewage. The fear now is that this sewage is going to be basically overflow inside into the city, into Gaza. People have nowhere to go. There are no shelters in Gaza. Any shelters that exist are schools. They're not fit or equipped to shelter people in adequate conditions. They're not fortified to sustain any airstrikes. People are stuck under the rubble. We don't know how many people actually have died. It's currently 1,300, but I mean, we assume that there's hundreds and hundreds more. A neighbor of my family was stuck under the rubble and found alive after 30 hours. People sleep together so that they die together. This is the situation in Gaza right now. The current siege imposed on Gaza is leading to humanitarian catastrophe.
Bushra, it's heartbreaking to hear those stories from you. I mean, I can understand how emotional you're getting and how this is a nightmare for you personally and for, all the other Palestinians. I think this is a reality that most people around the world cannot even begin to imagine. I'm so sorry to hear about what your colleagues are going through, what your family is experiencing, and the other Palestinians. You said that the death toll currently officially is 1,300, but you fear it could actually be much higher because there are so many bodies that are actually trapped under the rubble of collapsed buildings after these airstrikes, and perhaps it's impossible to know at this point how many people may have already lost their lives.
Yeah. Completely impossible.
You talked about how there is no power, no fuel. Fact of the matter is, as we've been reporting for the last couple of days, Israel has now imposed a total siege. There was already a blockade around Gaza, and now there is a total siege. They have cut off water supplies and food supplies and electricity and fuel. They say that they're targeting Hamas. The problem is that there are 2.3 million people who live in Gaza, and most of them are not Hamas. But that is the reality, that because of what Hamas has done, they are suffering today, these ordinary Palestinians. And when the Israelis say we gave them warnings, told them to leave, the question is, where would they go? Do they have anywhere to go, Bushra?
I mean, you just reminded me of yesterday we were on a call with a few colleagues of ours, and one of our colleagues, while we were on the phone, got a warning. When you receive a warning, first of all, you have minutes to leave. Second of all, now people are getting a lot of confusing messages in Gaza. Some of the warnings are not true. There's been voice notes shared around as warnings, but they're not incorrect. So people don't know whether they leave or they don't leave. People in Gaza, 70% of Gazans are actually already refugees and internally displaced. So now they're being displaced for I don't know how many times. Our colleague yesterday was telling us, where am I going to go? I can't even leave my house because of the street is so destroyed. There's so much rubble. There's so much destruction on the street. We can't even walk on the street. How am I supposed to even leave my house? Another colleague said that actually to be safe in Gaza, you have to stay away from windows, stand in a cornered wall, open your mouth, and wait for the airstrike to hit so that your eardrums don't pop. This is safety in Gaza.
it's unimaginable, like I said, Bushra. It really is unimaginable. People have nowhere to go. They can't walk on the streets that are littered with rubble. Where do they go? You said the warnings sometimes come just minutes before an airstrike. Can you give us a sense of how bad the situation is as far as food and water are concerned? Do you think those supplies are going to run out very soon because of this total siege that has been imposed? We will also talk about the hospitals in just a moment, but is food available? Do people have water? Basic necessities, essentials? How bad is it? What are you hearing from family and colleagues, though you mentioned that you've not managed to contact some of them?
I've heard from friends and family, and so this is kind of personal information that I'm receiving, that some people are drinking from toilets. There's no fresh water in Gaza. Anyway, before this crisis, there was no clean water in Gaza. The water from the taps are salty in Gaza. People buy trucked water for drinking. Water supplies are dwindling. There's no electricity. There's no internet. There's no phone lines. Gaza is a black box, isolated from the world. And we can't even understand the sheer destruction or how many lives have been lost or what is really happened, because we can't get in touch with people. And that is what was scary. People, even the media, can't get any images because of the issue of electricity and water. And I mean, electricity and water are essential needs in our lives, you know? They're day-to-day needs, and those are currently non-existent or almost non-existent, unless you're well off or you have planned for this or prepared for this. You'd have maybe some fuel supplies. Maybe you're connected to a generator and you have some fuel supplies. If you're using normal electric lines from the grid, there's no more electricity. There's no electricity from the grid, from the power plant in Gaza. So any electricity that currently exists in Gaza is from people's private generators.
The only power plant.
I don't know. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Please complete your point.
I mean, for me, what is also critical to highlight is the Gazans right now, you know, have gone through this for a sixth time, and this is all they've known. And I mean, we need to be able to enter Gaza to provide humanitarian relief, and we're unable to because all of the borders closed. And the day before yesterday, Israel struck 2 aid trucks coming from Egypt. So even through the Egyptian border, we're unable to get aid through. So I mean, the situation is I mean, it's completely catastrophic. I cannot stress that anymore.
It is catastrophic. I don't think there's any other way to describe it. But you know, Bushra, this is already the case with airstrikes being carried out. There are now very strong indications that there could be a ground invasion next. Thousands and thousands of troops are gathering at the border. How much worse is that likely to make this nightmarish situation for Gazans?
We don't even want to imagine it. Gaza is 2.2 million people, and like you said, 360 square kilometers. It's about 4 times smaller than London. I mean, just imagine what that could look like. 300,000, you know, armed Israeli armed forces inside Gaza. It's going to be a humanitarian catastrophe. It's going to be a complete, you know. I mean, I don't have the. I'm lost for words at just imagining the devastating consequences that this will have on such a densely populated area with almost half our children.
Exactly. Half of them are children. And, you know, Bushra, you've described the nightmare that the people of Gaza are living through right now. Buildings and their homes have been reduced to rubble. food supplies are running out, there is no fresh water, there is no electricity, hospitals are, running the risk of turning into mass morgues and cemeteries, as you put it. And, at this moment, Bushra, the reality, the very harsh reality is that the world is focused on Israel. And yes, we must condemn what happened in Israel. Those terror attacks were horrific. There was butchery and savagery. There can be absolutely no justification for what Hamas has done in Israel. It must be condemned, and our hearts do go out to the victims of those terror attacks in Israel. But the unfortunate reality is that the world is so focused on Israel alone, Bushra, that very few seem to be paying attention to the catastrophe that's unfolding in Gaza for the Palestinian people. Do you feel completely forgotten and abandoned by the world today?
This is the message from everybody. And this has been the message from Palestinians for, a very long time. I used to work for another humanitarian organization that focuses on children's rights. And we found in a recent research 2 years ago, this was published, that 4 out of 5 children in Gaza feel abandoned by the world. 4 out of 5 children in Gaza feel hopeless and can't dream anymore. Almost half of the caregivers at the time had said that their children thought of self-harm and negative suicidal thoughts. I mean, the consequences, the long-term impact as well. We're not also talking about the long-term impact this has on children. This is our reality, and unfortunately, it is often the case that media tends to focus a lot on Israel, and absolutely, the images we saw on Saturday were shocking, and the international community, including Oxfam, condemned, all this violence and the heinous crimes committed by both sides. But, we're also urging authorities to adhere to international law. There's laws in place. They're very clear about how you should exercise maximum restraint. There are principles of proportionality, of neutrality, of impartiality in international law that responsible authorities should adhere to. There's also a framing around the right to allow, or the legal framing that urges these parties to allow the provision of much needed relied assistance and for the safe and unimpeded access of humanitarian workers, so that we can operate, so that we can provide that urgent relief service, and nobody is respecting that. We need, we've lived through this for years, and we have been asking, and we have asked as Oxfam and also as a wider international community for leaders to tackle the root causes of this injustice, of the 57-year military occupation and 16-year-old illegal blockade on Gaza. We have forewarned the world many a times of how the humanitarian situation in Gaza was at a brink. And now we're seeing it unfold before our very eyes.
Bushra, over the last few days since those terror attacks in Israel, we've got a lot of Israelis on our shows. But we also want our viewers to know what the Palestinians are going through. What would you like to say to our viewers here in India and elsewhere in the world who might be watching you? What would you want to say?
This will need to be my last point, because I am in back-to-back. So my message is that human beings are human beings everywhere. Never should civilians be a target. We call on maximum restraints by all parties to end the violence and cease the violence. And we need leaders to genuinely attack the root causes of this injustice and this violence, and take bold action. Statements are not enough, and aid is also not enough, because aid is only a bandage on deep wounds that have, that keep being opened every couple of years. So that is my message.
And I would like you to know that all of us here in India, Bushra, we are praying for the victims of the terror attacks in Israel, and we are praying for the Palestinians who are suffering.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for your
Thank
time
you.
and for sharing your story with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Stay safe. All right, on that note, let's take a quick break here on Global Lens, but don't go anywhere. On the other side, we have an exclusive interview with a former Deputy Foreign Minister of Israel, who's currently a member of the Knesset. Listen into what he has to say about the Israeli counter-offensive against Gaza.
Literally every major power in the world is gearing up with its own digital currency. And so is India. But India's UPI has taken digital transactions to the next level. So, with UPI already available, what exactly is the use case for the e-rupee?
This and more streaming on world's first news OTT. News9 Plus, download now.